Greetings, Missouri Mid-South Conference. I bring you greetings from my home in Houston, Texas. And I especially wanted to share this week a little bit of my home where I was last week for about 3.5 days. I was able to rest and spend some time with my husband and be here at my kitchen table. This table is very special to me, not only because it has been in my family's, my husband and my house here, but growing up. This was my family's table where we ate and where we talked about our day. I remember this glass top table very fondly as the place where my sister and I would talk about school, and my mom and dad would talk about work, and we would talk about life, the good and the bad. And so when I went off to college and then I went off to seminary, and as young adults do, and they don't have any furniture, and so I came home and I said, I need a table. And this glass top table was then in storage, and so my parents said, we don't need it, so you go ahead, you can take it. And so it has stayed with me throughout my adult journey. So this has been a wonderful companion for me, where meals have been shared and where conversations and love has been expressed in many ways. Our tables are very important in our lives. They reflect and actually hold very intimate moments for many of us that are filled with goodness, and sometimes that are filled with deep sorrow and sadness. I invite you to think about your own table in your family. What does your table look like? Is it niched with the scars of family life? Do you have memories that surround it? Do you have wonderful stories of its heritage and where you bought it or where you inherited it from? The table reminds us that we are called to gather together, not just to live our lives separately or individually, but we are called to gather at our table. The scriptures are filled with stories about the table, about ways and moments when people came together to eat, to be nourished, and to connect in love. The Hebrew scriptures, the Christian scriptures. Jesus has many stories where he came to the table when people did not expect him to come to the table with people that were unseemly or that were his enemies or people who were questioning him. It was at the table that they gathered and they were community together. And so I want to introduce to you a theme that I'm going to invite us to share and gather together as the Missouri Mid-South Conference. The theme for this first half of 2016 is going to be gathering at our table. As I began to think about the beginning of my ministry with you, and I was wondering what kind of images, what can bring us together? How are we united together in who we are and who we are called to be as followers of Jesus? And immediately what I knew was that we all have tables. Some of us have kitchen tables. Some of us have dining room tables. Some of us have a lap that serves as our table, but always we have something that connects us together, where we gather as family, as friends, as co-workers, as classmates. We gather together to be community to one another. But in our sanctuaries, we also have a table. Some of us call it the altar table. Some of us call it the place where communion is offered. The altar table in the Hebrew scriptures, the altar was the place where people understood that God resided, that God was in that place, that worship and holiness was at the table. And so in these next few months, leading up to our conference annual gathering in June, I'm going to invite us in a lot of different ways to talk about and express who we are as we are gathering at our table. I'm going to do it in some fun ways of inviting you to share pictures of your own tables, just like my glass top table. But I'm also going to invite us to think theologically, to think spiritually, to think in practical ways as a conference of who we are supposed to be when we're talking about sacred conversations of race. What does that look like as we are gathering at our table? As we're talking about budgets and the conference council and covenanted ministries and committees on ministry, what does it mean that we are connected and we are gathering at our tables? My hope and my prayer is that this theme together, gathering at our table, will unite us in bringing what we all have in common with what we have in common from the stories of the scriptures, of the altar, of the table of food, where community is created and nourished and sustained. But also, who is God calling us to be when we disagree? How do we remember to gather at our table when we disagree in the conference? Because that is what is important. And when we celebrate life and all that is in it, how do we celebrate and worship gathering at our table? So, my brothers and sisters of the Missouri Mid-South Conference, here is our theme, our mission, our ministry. From now until June, we are gathering at our table. I invite you to think about that, to celebrate it, to connect in with your local church, and then to offer the many ways and expressions of God's love that God has called us to our own tables and that God invites us to the wider table of God's beloved community. This day and forevermore. Amen.